the thing that screams in the dark. It started as a whisper. Late at night, when the rest of the world sank into sleep, I heard it, just beyond the edges of my perception, like someone exhaling right against my eardrum. A faint, wordless murmur. At first, I chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me, the kind of noise you get when you're sleep-deprived. Stress, I told myself. Just stress. But it was there the next night. And the night after that. A soft, slithering sound, almost like wet fabric sliding across the floor. The whisper got louder. The kind of noise that curls around you, tightens, and refuses to let go. Every night it got a little closer, clawing into the silence of my room. Then one night the whisper stopped. I woke up in total silence, the kind that presses against your skull. The air felt wrong, like it had been stirred by something unseen. It was then that I noticed a smell, a sickly sweet stench, like rotting flowers and meat left in the sun. My heart thudded against my ribs. I didn't want to move, couldn't. My eyes locked onto the doorway leading to the hallway, the weak light from outside barely filtering in. That's when I saw it. A shadow, shifting at the edge of the light, the shape of it blurry and indistinct. At first, it looked like an oily stain on the wall, something not quite right with the way it moved. But then it stretched, pulling itself forward like a puppet with broken strings. Its arms, God, they were long, ended in fingers that curled like hooks, each one twitching, aching to scrape and tear. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Its face, or what should have been its face, emerged from the darkness. There were no eyes, just gaping black pits that seemed to drink in what little light there was. And its mouth, a cavern of ragged teeth and a throat that stretched back far too deep. It was open wide, impossibly wide, as if it had unhinged its jaw. It watched me even without eyes. And then it screamed. It was not a sound that should exist. Tore into my brain, flaying my thoughts raw. The noise was high-pitched, shrill, but underneath it, there was something deeper, like the rumble of an ancient machine grinding up bones. My ears felt like they were bleeding. Maybe they were. The world spun and warped around me. I wanted to scream back, to thrash, but I couldn't. My body was paralyzed, pinned by the weight of its sound. Then the thing moved closer. Its limbs dragged along the floor with that same wet, whispering sound I'd heard for weeks. I realized I hadn't been imagining it all those nights. It had been there, waiting. It loomed over me, its mouth still gaping, but the scream had stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The smell of decay wrapped around me, filling my lungs. I could hear its breathing now, a ragged, hollow wheeze that seemed to echo in my head. The creature's head tilted, its mouth twitching as if it was tasting my fear, savoring it. One long, clawed hand reached toward me, the fingers brushing against my cheek. They were cold, too cold, like metal left in ice. Finally, my body listened to me. I jerked away, falling off the bed, my legs scrambling for purchase on the floor. My vision was swimming, but I didn't care. I ran down the hallway, through the living room, out the door. I didn't stop until my lungs screamed and my legs threatened to buckle. When I finally looked back, there was nothing. Just the quiet, empty street. My house standing there, windows dark and hollow. I didn't go back. Couldn't. I crashed on a friend's couch, afraid to even close my eyes. When the police checked the house the next day, they found nothing out of the ordinary. But that doesn't matter. I know what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. Every night since then, I lie in a new place with new locks, new walls, but I know it's still out there. Because sometimes, in those fragile moments before sleep, I hear it again. The whisper, the dragging sound, and I know it's coming for me. Fishing with Uncle Frank. Fishing with Uncle Frank was always an event. The man knew every lake, river, and backwoods creek for miles, and he told stories that made you believe he'd fished them all since time began. But that trip to Blackwater Lake, our last fishing trip, was one I'll never forget. It started early, way before the sun even hinted at rising. Uncle Frank picked me up in his old Ford truck, its headlights barely cutting through the dense fog rolling off the hills. I'd heard of Blackwater Lake before. Everyone in town had, but no one talked about it in any detail. The stories were vague. Whispered warnings, rumors of disappearances, and a tale or two about the lake being cursed. Uncle Frank just laughed when I brought it up. "Curses don't catch fish, kid. And Blackwater's got the biggest base in the county," he said, flashing that grin of his that always seemed a little too wide. The road to the lake was rough, overgrown with weeds and potholes that rattled your bones when you hit them. By the time we arrived, the fog was so thick it seemed to swallow everything beyond a few feet. I couldn't even see the lake's surface, but I could hear it. The faint lap of water against the shore, rhythmic and hollow, like something breathing. Uncle Frank didn't seem bothered. He grabbed the cooler, our rods, and the tackle box and motioned for me to follow. "Come on, let's get out there before the fish wake up." We pushed a rickety old rowboat into the water and climbed in. The lake smelled off, like mud and something metallic, and the further we rowed, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, nothing but the creak of the oars and the occasional splash as something unseen moved beneath the surface. About halfway across, Uncle Frank stopped rowing and stared at the water. "This is the spot," he said, his voice low. I didn't question him. He always knew where to find the best fishing holes, though something about the way he said it made the hair on my neck stand up. We cast our lines and waited. The fog seemed thicker out here, clinging to my skin like damp cobwebs. Time dragged on and not a single bite. Uncle Frank just sat there, motionless, staring at the water. "You okay, Uncle Frank?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Did I ever tell you about my first time out here?" I shook my head. "Caught the biggest bass of my life," he said. But there was no pride in his voice, just something cold and flat. Thing was nearly 3 feet long, strong enough to snap my line if I wasn't careful. Fought me for a good 20 minutes before I got it into the boat. He paused, his eyes still locked on the water. But when I looked closer, I noticed something. His eyes, they weren't right. Too big, too human. And its mouth, he trailed off, shaking his head. I laughed nervously. "You're messing with me." He finally looked at me then, his face pale and serious. "You think I'm joking?" Before I could respond, my line went taut. The rod bent sharply, and I nearly lost my grip. "Got one," I shouted, adrenaline surging. "Reel it in slow," Uncle Frank said, but his voice wasn't excited. It was tense, almost scared. Whatever was on the other end of my line was strong, jerking and pulling like it was trying to drag me into the water. I reeled as hard as I could, my arms burning, until finally, something broke the surface. At first, I thought it was a fish, a massive black-scaled monster with jagged fins, but then I saw its face. It wasn't a face at all, not one that should exist on this earth. Its eyes were milky white, too large for its head, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. It let out a sound, a horrible wet gurgle that made my stomach churn. I screamed and dropped the rod. The thing vanished beneath the water, and Uncle Frank grabbed my arm. "We're leaving," he said, his voice shaking. I didn't argue. He rowed us back to shore faster than I thought possible, his hands white-knuckled on the oars. The fog seemed to close in around us, and more than once, I thought I saw something moving just beneath the surface, keeping pace with us. When we finally reached land, Uncle Frank didn't say a word. He hauled the boat up, threw our gear into the truck, and started the engine. I didn't ask questions. As we drove away, I glanced back at the lake. Through the fog, I thought I saw something standing on the shore, watching us. It was tall, thin, and its glowing white eyes burned into my memory. Uncle Frank never mentioned Blackwater Lake again, and neither did I. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about that thing in the water. And in those dreams, I'm back in the boat, my line going taut, and the fog closing in. Only this time, I don't make it back to shore. Belleville Mental Hospital. I am a 44-year-old and a mental health professional. I spend a lot of time with psych ward patients to diagnose mental health conditions and provide treatment. I've worked at the state prison here in my town for the last 6 years. However, I was offered a job at a new facility by the head physician, Dr. Raymond Fuller. I inevitably took it in hopes of getting a promotion. It is called Belleville Mental Hospital. It is a very high-profile place for the mentally ill. People from all over the country get admitted here, and I've decided to document and share some of my stories with you all, no real names, of course. Today was my first day, and let me tell you, it was interesting. I pulled up to the institution at 8:55 a.m. The building looks like it was an old high school. It was freshly painted mundane gray, with light blue lettering reading Belleville Mental Hospital. There was fresh sod on either side of the walkway, which was a nice touch, I thought. I walked up through the sliding glass doors and was immediately greeted with a patient pissing all over the wall while employees were awkwardly flirting with each other. You may want to get that, I say, annoyed to the two workers who immediately gasp and run over. I can already tell this is going to be a long day. I began to roam the hallways trying to become more familiar with my new surroundings. All of the building walls were painted white, complemented with a white and red tiled floor. I had peeked in a few rooms as I walked, nothing out of the ordinary. One patient was strapped to her bed, still trashing, trying to get out of the restraints, but to no avail. She had to be sedated because the restraints began to rip into her skin from the thrashing. Blood was starting to seep from her wounds onto the sheets. Another patient was softly banging his head on the wall while speaking gibberish into it. He stopped and looked over at me, staring at him through the porthole window. He walked up the window and stared right into my eyes, still speaking the same gibberish from before. His eyes were such a light color they were practically gray in the light illuminating his room. He smiled at me, his teeth were rotten, and he only had about 5 of them. He was older, maybe in his 50s. He raised his hand to the window and placed it on the seal. His words became more apparent once he did that. "Get me out of here," the man kept repeating. Louder and louder he became. He was gripping the window with both hands now, scratching and clawing at it, trying to force his way out. He was screaming hysterically now. His fingernails were peeling off of his fingers from the force. I was pulling away by one of the attendees. "Sorry about that, we try not to watch him like that. He does things like that every time. At least he wasn't clawing at his eyes this time," he said. "I'm sorry about that. I'm new here. My name is Jason Calloway," I replied. "Nice to meet you, Jason. You can call me Gibbs," he said. "Well, Gibbs, is Dr. Fuller in yet? I need to speak with him and get up to speed for what he wants me to do while I am here," I asked. "Oh, he won't be in today. He called and said he had some important business to attend to," Gibbs responded. "That's strange. He didn't give me a heads up," I said. "He's terrible at communication," Gibbs replied quickly. "Now, let's get you into your office." He gave me directions for what I am supposed to do with you for now. "Dr. Fuller may not be here, but you have the next best thing, Dr. Grant. His office is right next to yours." Gibbs then took me to my office next to Dr. Grant's, right next to Dr. Fuller's. It was strange that Dr. Fuller had stood me up like that, but it's okay. I'll have to catch with him tomorrow. My office looks as you would expect, with white walls with some generic carpeting, a desk, and a couple of chairs for visitors. I loved it with a plant on the desk. He had left an assignment for me. I had to speak with a patient named Kyle Harth. He was deemed criminally insane. Instead of being in prison for his hellacious crimes, he was sent here to be evaluated and treated. I was directed over to Mr. Harth's room by a nurse lady. She led me down the hallway but then stopped and took a step off to the side. "This is as far as I go, Mr. I don't like going near his room. I can't explain it, but the vibe is just off," she said as she practically ran off. "Oh great, can't wait to see what this will be like." I walk up to his door, and I look at him through his window. He was sitting in the middle of his bed with his legs crossed, staring straight ahead at the wall. I open his door and close it behind me. I look back through the window and see 2 security guards come up and stand by the door, just in case, I suppose. "Mr. Harth, I am Dr. Calloway, and I will be visiting with you for the next couple of weeks. How are you doing today?" I watched him intently as he was staring at the wall. Now, keep in mind, all of these rooms only have a bed in it with a desk for them to sit as well. However, he didn't have a desk in there, it was only his bed, and he didn't have any sheets. "Mr. Harth, why don't you have any sheets?" I asked. He turns his head slowly over to me and looks me up and down, sizing me up. It was like a lion staring down his next meal. It was an eerie feeling for sure, but I stood my ground. He had turned and placed his legs over the bed with his feet touching the ground, and he stands up to look me over more intently. He was a decent-sized man. He had about 4 inches of height on me, about 6 feet 2 inches. His hair was gray, and the length went down to his shoulders. His eyes were so dark they looked black, and his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. I was sure he was going to hit me. "Why don't I have sheets? They took them away from me. I sleep on this slab of concrete here, but they call it a bed." He grunted. "Well, why did they take them from you? Did you try to hurt yourself with them?" I asked. He scoffs and takes a step closer to me. "They took them because the last time someone came in this room with me, I wrapped them around their neck and pulled so tight their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets," he said calmly. "That would explain it then. Why don't you have a seat so we can talk a little bit more?" I asked him, terrified. "I think I'll stand, doctor," he said as he took a step closer in my direction. The 2 security guards then stepped in at that moment. "Okay, doctor, that's enough for today. You can try again tomorrow," one of the men said. I looked over at them, taking my eyes off of Kyle for a moment. He then lunged at me and had grabbed me by my shirt and pulled me in close. "I can't wait for our next meeting, Doc," he whispered into my ear. He then released me as the security guards tackled him to the ground. I exited the room as they were tending to Mr. Harth and continued back to my office. It turns out that I'm going to need a game plan next time I speak with him. Since he was my only appointment, I had decided to call it a day. Dr. Fuller should be in tomorrow, and I'll be able to meet with him to see what his plans are for me. As I was walking out, I noticed that same patient peeing on the wall again. While those same 2 employees weren't paying attention, I couldn't help but laugh. "Again?" I said, chuckling. The 2 ran towards the man to stop him once more. "I'm going to sign off for now, and I will update you tomorrow as long as something interesting happens." Posted on January 8, 2017. 7:43 p.m. Hey, sorry for the late update. I've had a crazy couple of days here at Belleville. Unfortunately, I have yet to meet Dr. Fuller, which is hugely frustrating for me. However, I did meet Dr. Grant. He was interesting to say the least. He was a little bald man with the thickest glasses I have ever seen. He had a gray beard and wore the same outfit the last few days. Black dress shoes, black slacks, a white shirt, black tie, and a white lab coat. It's especially peculiar because it is the same outfit every day, not like he only owns different sets of the same attire. He only wears that ensemble. He's had the same coffee stain on his shirt collar. I commented on it, and he looked at me like I was a crazy person. It was very odd. Anyway, all of you aren't interested in that, so let me tell me a few things that had happened. On my second day of work, I walked into not only that same patient pissing on the wall again, but to another patient roaming the halls aimlessly. This one is a female. She had a bob haircut, her hair was very messy, and she had a gown on. I didn't see any orders with her, so I walked up to her and asked if she was okay and if I could take her to her room. She looked up at me and stared into my eyes. Her eyes were emerald green. She had a blank expression on her face. She turned away from me and continued roaming the hall aimlessly. The back of her gown was open, and I could see actual shit falling out of her. It was effortless. It was also one of the grossest things I've seen so far. There is no orderly insight. I was so confused. Who is watching these patients, I thought. As I continued over to my office, I saw Dr. Grant. He was standing in the hallway staring directly at me, but once I got to him to greet him. However, he wasn't looking at me, he was looking through me. I waved my hand in front of his face to get his attention, but to no avail. It was like he was frozen in time. Things only got stranger from that point. I tried to call Dr. Fuller to get any idea as to when I would meet him, yet his line seemed to have been disconnected. There is no order in this facility. It's frustrating. The orderlies are not doing their jobs. They just let these patients walk around free, but they at least keep Mr. Harth behind his door and one other patient. That first one I mentioned with the cloudy eyes. I met with him this morning as well. Let's call him Peter Hicks. When I walked up to his door, I peeked in the window first before entering. He was standing in front of one of the 4 walls in his room, gently bumping his head into it. He had to have been at it for quite a while because there was blood there on the wall. I slowly opened his door not to startle him, but he continued hitting his head on the wall. "Mr. Hicks, could you please stop hitting your head on the wall? I want to speak with you for a little bit about how you are doing and what you think about this place." He had stopped, but he did not turn around or acknowledge me in any way. He continues staring at the wall as his blood starts to run down the wall and his face. "Mr. Hicks, what do you think about this place? Do you feel that you are adequately taken care of? Do you feel like you are making any progress with your mental state? Your file says that you were admitted here because of your severe depression." Mr. Hicks just made a grunting sound, but at least he acknowledged that I was speaking with him. "You did a number on that wall. Are you okay? You must have been at that for a minute." "They won't stop," he replies. "Excuse me?" I asked. He turns around to look at me. "Don't you hear them? The voices won't stop," he exclaimed. Taken aback, I ask him, "I don't hear anything, Mr. Hicks. What are they saying to you? They keep telling me to bash my head on this wall. That's the only way I'll get out of this place," he replies. "Mr. Hicks, I assure you that won't get you out here, Parisi. That'll send you to a different hospital, and once they deem you healed, you'll be right back in this room," I said. I can hear him muttering now. He sounds very frustrated, but I can't make out what he says. He is grabbing at his hair and pulling on it and slapping at his forehead, the same place that he was hitting his head on the wall. "No, I don't want to do it. Just shut up," he bursts out. "Are you okay? Do I need to get someone to help you?" I asked. He stops moving and slowly moves to look at me. The voices, they're telling me. He starts breathing very hard. "What are they telling you?" I asked him, scared of what he'll do next. He reaches into the waistband of his sweatpants. "They are telling me that I have to kill you, doctor." He pulls out a sharp object from his waistband. It appeared to be like a fork that he broke the prongs off and sharpened the end. It was gleaming off of the light in the room. I stood up and put my hands out to try to keep some distance between us. "Okay, you need to put the weapon down. Killing me won't solve any of your problems. You'll just be creating more for yourself," I said quickly. He takes a couple of steps forward. I can see him licking his lips. "I can't help myself. You're the only thing standing in my way. No one in this building pays any attention around here. I'll be able to walk right out the door." He takes a swipe at me and catches me on the palm of my left hand. I take the clipboard in my hand and throw it at him, hits him in between the eyes. The impact stumbles him enough for me to escape through the door. I look back through the window, and I see him standing there staring back at me. It was a very close call, and now I was all by myself in the hallway. Half of the lights were off. It was very eerie. I didn't see workers anywhere. All of the patients that were wandering the halls previously had vanished. I assumed they were back in their rooms and the workers were off doing whatever it is these losers do all day. Nothing notable has happened, but I still think Dr. Grant is strange and all of the workers here are very strange. Dr. Fuller has yet to return any of my calls. Hopefully, by the next update, I would have talked with the doctor and finally have settled in the position I'm supposed to be in. Anyways, I'll bring an update in the next few days. Until next time, this is Dr. Calloway signing off. Posted on January 17th, 2017. 9:14 p.m. Hello all. I'm sorry it has been so long since my last update. I'm delighted to see how many people are enjoying reading my experiences here at Belleville. A lot of you are very concerned with Dr. Grant. Understandable. He is an extraordinary man, however. I haven't seen him come out of his office in the last week or so since the previous update, so I can't tell you any more weird things with him at the moment, however. I finally heard from Dr. Fuller, which was an experience within itself, but I'll share that with you in a little bit. First, I want to talk to you about Mr. Hicks, Mr. Harth, and then a new patient who arrived a few days ago, Ms. Bunt. Now, I had a couple of appointments with Mr. Hicks, and each one was very different from the other. Let me explain why. The first one was the most nerve-wracking because it was the first time I've seen him since he had threatened to kill me. After all, the voices were telling him too. I walked up to his door sweating, and when I looked through his window to see where he was standing directly in front of the window staring right through me. "Are you okay?" I asked him through the door. He nodded and backed up a bit so I could open the door to speak with him. "How are those voices? Are you still hearing them?" I asked him as I settled into his room. "Not as loud. I'm sorry about before. I feel very badly about it. Sometimes I'm unable to control myself," he responded. "I understand, Mr. Hicks. For now, let's try to continue on this trend of keeping the voices as quiet as you can. That way, you don't do anything you regret. Now, how are you doing otherwise?" He dropped his head dead and looked solemnly to the floor. "Honestly, not well. I've been battling my demons. I feel so alone. I am confined to this room 24 hours a day. I don't have a window to look outside. Truly, this is cruel to do this to these patients, including myself. I need to get out of here before I do something rash," he said slowly. "Well, I have to agree with you. You are in a rough situation, and this place isn't great. This hospital needs a complete overhaul. Once Dr. Fuller gets back, I'm hoping to have a conversation to move you to another room or facility to accommodate you. However, I have to ask you to be patient. I want to help you, but I won't be able to do something stupid to jeopardize the situation," I responded. I was watching him closely as his head was drooping lower as well as his body. He was lying in his bed now. "I think I need to rest. I can hear the voices coming back. Please go. Thank you for checking in with me," he said. "Okay, I will see you soon. Please be well," I responded. I get up slowly, pat him on his leg for reassurance that I will be back. I slip out the door, and he begins thrashing in his bed. "Stay away. I don't want you here." He begins to scream. I scurried away quickly to my next appointment. I've gotten a lot of questions asking about Mr. Harth. Well, let me tell you, he's had a few incidents since I've seen him last. He attacked a nurse with his fists. He broke her orbital socket with a single punch because she tried to administer his medicine. Took 2 workers to restrain him after that. He escaped out of his room and nearly killed a visiting doctor here a few days ago. Once he was done beating on the doctor, leaving him for dead, I assume, he had calmly walked back to his room, dragging his bloody hand across the wall, leaving a long trail for everyone to see. Fortunately, I didn't have an eventful experience with him, but it was still wild. I walk up to his room very hesitantly. I assure you, I look through his window to see where he was at and what he was doing. He was sitting on his bed, legs crossed. Like the first time I saw him, I walk in and close the door behind me. "Hello, Mr. Harth. How are we doing today?" I asked him. He brings up a hand and points his index finger up to tell me to wait a moment. I sat there patiently, not to disturb whatever it is he was doing. After a moment, he opens his eyes and smiles at me. "Sorry about that. I was meditating. I didn't want you to interrupt me again. I would have killed you this time. So what do you want now? I know you've seen I've been on a bit of a rampage as of late," he said promptly. I raised an eyebrow and looked into his eyes. "I wanted to check up on you, make sure everything was okay in that head of yours. Although I think there is something to talk about for sure," I replied. He giggled, which scared me a little, but I held my ground. "All right, let's talk. I do have a few things to say about you and this place," he replied with a smile. "Proceed then," I said. "I noticed you don't have any backup with you this time. Do you think you're a tough guy or something? All of a sudden, you aren't afraid of me?" he said aggressively. I didn't respond. I didn't want to risk saying the wrong thing to him because he was right. He could do whatever he wanted to me in here, and no one would be there to help me. "Interesting. Let's talk about this place they call a facility, shall we?" he continued. "This place is shit. The head doctor is absent. I never get restrained, as you could see from my actions from the other day. The people here don't understand what a maniac like myself is capable of. If I felt like it, I would snap your neck right now and sleep with your corpse for a few days, and no one would even notice," he said. That's what he would do to his victims. However, they were mostly women, and he would rape them after they were dead multiple times. That would be correct, but I have to ask, why don't you do all of that? You could get up and walk away and do as you please out in the streets. Well, until you get caught again, I said hesitantly. He erupted in laughter, which made me take a step back. You were something else, Doc. But you're right, I could walk out. I'm choosing not to. All because I actually want the help. I want to go to a real prison so I can be the alpha male there and run the yard the way I want it ran. Think you can help me out? He asked. He then stands up and walks over to the concrete wall and punches it, cracking the concrete from the impact. The sound was shocking. It was clearly a ploy to scare me into helping him. I look at the wall and then back at him. I'll see what I can do. For now, I must go. I have another patient to see today before I go home today. I responded. I begin to stand from my chair when he rushes toward me and pushes me back down into my chair. He bends down to look me right in my eyes. He's gripping my knees with so much force I feel like he's gonna out my kneecaps. Listen, doctor, I'm gonna hold you to that. The next time I see you, there had better be some progress in getting me transferred. Otherwise, you won't be walking out of my room unharmed again, he says as he releases me. I feel the blood rush back through my legs. He walks back to his bed and sits on it. Figure it out. I'll see you soon, he says as he lies down. I get up from my seat and quickly exit the room. I'm going to need to figure something out. I don't necessarily want to meet with him again under these circumstances. Lastly, I met with Ms. Bunt. So far, she is the creepiest person I have ever met in my life. She has big bug eyes, a little nose, and a small mouth. She has short red hair as well as a petite build. Her voice is very mouse-like as well. I know what you think. She can't seem that bad. She is completely demented. She's another patient that entered this facility and was deemed criminally insane. She was brought here because she had turned to attendants of the trial during her trial for 6 counts of murder and began yelling at them. I killed your children. I killed your spouses. I want to kill you all. But I'm chained to this table. She burst into laughter after seeing everyone's reactions. She then turned to the jury and said, if you convict me, I will find you all. I won't kill any of you, but I will kill your families and loved ones in front of you, and you will have to deal with the fact that you had gotten them killed. Make your choice wisely. Ultimately, they continued the trial and convicted her of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and she was also sentenced to get extensive therapy because she needed it. Belleville was the lucky choice for her, and I am the lucky man to deal with this delightful woman. As you've gathered, I'm sure, I'm thrilled about what this experience will bring me. Her room was a few doors down from my office. Her door was open, however, and my heart sank. I didn't want to meet this woman on her terms, so I hustled over to her door, and she was being put in a straitjacket. She was sitting in the middle of her bed with a small smile on her face. How cute! You big men can't handle little OL me? She asked the men. They didn't respond. They saw me at the door as they were walking out. The first one left looking at me like he felt sorry for me. Then the second one put his hand on my shoulder as he walked out. Good luck, you're going to need it. Oh, and don't get too close. She bites hard. He raises his arm to show me that she had bitten him hard enough to draw blood. I told you not to touch me, she called out to him. She giggled as I walked into the room. Well, look at you. Can you get this jacket off of me? I promise I won't hurt you, she said sweetly. I'm good, I responded. Now, how about we talk about what has gotten you here? Do you hope to move to prison after this? Or do you plan to stay in a mental institution the rest of your life? I asked. Her smile left her face, and she stared at me, with her head tilted slightly. You think you're so smart, don't you? You pompous ass. Do you want to know why I killed those men? She asked. Yes, I do. Maybe I'll be able to get to the root of the problem here, I responded. Admittedly, I was a bit more confrontational because she was restrained, but I needed this today. It had been a rough one. I killed those men because I wanted to see if I could. I hate men. They are the root of all evil. They need only to exist to reproduce. They shouldn't have to be anything but a dick to fuck, she said aggressively. Okay, fair enough. Can I ask you why these feelings are so strong? I asked her tentatively. She giggled once more. Sure, we can talk about that. My stepfather used to abuse me every night, doing whatever he wanted to me, whether he was drunk or not. She replied, well, that is terrible. Did you tell your mother or seek help? I asked. I didn't have to tell my mother. She already knew. She was too scared of that piece of shit to do anything about it. She continued. I resent her for that. I was her only child, and she let her baby get abused in that way whenever he pleased until I fought back, she said. So, you had to come up with your solution? I asked. Obviously, she said, annoyed. His time to abuse me was once he got off work. He came barging into my room, and I was waiting for him with a knife hidden behind my back. He came at me undoing his belt when I pulled the knife out and stabbed him in his stomach. I stabbed him 4 times while he was alive. There was so much blood pouring on my carpet. He died clutching at the stab wounds and staring at me. I got on top of him and slowly drove the knife into his heart while staring into his eyes. I needed to watch that man die, she said, smiling again. My palms were beginning to become sweaty. There was something off about that story, but I don't know what it was. There was more to it. That's how your hatred for men came out? I asked. You never asked what happened to my father. I killed him, too. I just made it look like an accident. I have never liked men. My father was a decent man, took care of us, never laid a finger on my mother or me. I only had an overwhelming hatred for him, all because he was a man. One day, I found him in the garage, working on his truck. He had it jacked up, and he was under it fixing something on it. He was always doing something with it. So I took the jack and dropped the truck on top of him. It split his head like a melon with blood pouring out from under the car. I loved it, she said, laughing. All right, that is a compelling story. Now, I'm going to come back tomorrow to talk with you some more. I have a lot to digest here. Thank you for your time today, I said. Oh, please do come back. Hopefully, I won't have this jacket on, and we'll really be able to get to know each other, she said with a smile as I walked out of the room. As I exited the room, I hear my phone ring. It said, Dr. Fuller. At last, I finally get to talk to this man again. Dr. Fuller, I'm so glad to be hearing from you. This place is a disaster. When are you coming back? I said quickly. I heard a man respond, but it wasn't Dr. Fuller. It almost sounded like Dr. Grant, trying to sound like Dr. Fuller. It was bizarre. Hello, Dr. Calloway. I'm sorry I've been away. I know you've been eager to meet with me, but you're just going to have to wait a little longer. I'll be in the office sometime this week, and we'll speak then. For now, stay safe over there. Things could get ugly, the man said as he hung up. What did he mean by that? Things could get ugly? I guess I'm gonna have to find out. I battled with that sentence my whole way home. I hear Dr. Fuller is supposed to show up tomorrow, so I'll get to the bottom of it then. For now, I'll be signing off, and I hope you've enjoyed this update. I'll post another one soon. Thank you all for your support in this adventure I'm enduring. Posted on January 22nd, 2017, 8:13 p.m. Hello everyone. I quit my job 3 days ago at Belleville Mental Hospital. I was almost killed, and this will be the final update because I feel like I owe this to all of you even though it pains me to relive this hellish day. Also, this will be the last you hear from Dr. Calloway. Again, thank you for following me in this endeavor, and please lock your doors. I arrive at the hospital on my last day and saw a nurse standing outside having a cigarette. Hello, is Dr. Fuller or Dr. Grant in? I need to speak with them about Ms. Bunt. I asked. Who? She asked, annoyed. Dr. Fuller or Dr. Grant? You know, the only 2 doctors that work here. I responded. Yeah, I know who Dr. Fuller is, but there is no Dr. Grant. I don't know who that is. But no, Dr. Fuller is not here. She replied. That's very odd. I thought. Maybe she's new or something because there's a Dr. Grant. Well, I better go look to see who is here. As I walk in, I don't see any workers. All I see are patients walking around the halls. All of their doors are open, including Mr. Harth and Ms. Bunt. I walk by Mr. Hicks' door and see him hanging from a rope tied around the light fixture hanging from his ceiling. He had committed suicide and he was dead for at least 6 hours. That nurse had to have walked by and seen that, right? Why didn't she take him down or possibly check on him before that had happened? I turned back to walk out the door, and I can see her staring at me from the doorway. I walk towards her to ask her what is going on here, but she slams the doors and locks them before I get there. "Good luck, you're going to need it," she said with a smile as she walked away. I turned around and saw that the whole building had been destroyed. There was debris everywhere. Dr. Fuller's door was open. I decided to go in there and see who was in there. When I walked by Mr. Hicks' room, I noticed his body was no longer hanging in there. I looked in the room and saw that he wasn't in there at all. Someone had moved him. I tried calling 911. However, I wasn't getting a signal at that moment. I tried using the landline at the nurse's desk, but the lines had been cut. It would appear that something was very wrong here. I turned to see that Mr. Harth's room was empty. Panic had begun to set in as I continued to walk to Dr. Fuller's office. When I got to Ms. Bunt's room, she wasn't in there either. This was very bad. Those two put together is incredibly dangerous, and they were probably watching me. Whether they were together or not, I could feel their eyes on me. I continued to the doctor's office. I can see someone sitting in the chair, but it was dark. I tried to turn the light on, but it wasn't working. I fear the worst. Are they in here with me? Who is that in the chair? "Hello," I said quietly. No response. I walk up to the chair to get a closer look. It was Dr. Fuller, but he was dead. It looked like he had been for a while. He had gotten strangled with his own telephone cord. It was strung out his neck so tightly that his eyes popped out of their sockets. I also had noticed that his wrists were bound to his chair. I was in shock. I didn't think I could move at that moment. I heard someone walk into the room. I turned around slowly to see Dr. Grant. "Dr. Grant, what is going on here? What happened to Dr. Fuller? Who did this?" I said quickly. I was so scared. "He was a weakling, Dr. Calloway. He didn't want this place to run the right way. That's why I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I used to live in room 009. Dr. Fuller wasn't taking me seriously, so I decided I needed to take his place. For the good of the facility," he said. "I don't understand. You were a patient here?" I asked. "You idiot. Don't you understand anything? Are you that naive that you think that this man could run this place? I'm not crazy. I deserve to be the head doctor of this place. Only the real patients know how to run this place," he said pompously. Before I could get another word out, I was punched in the face from the side by Mr. Harth. He was hiding out in the dark for the right moment. I crumbled to the ground from the impact and looked up at the two of them. "I could kill you right now, but luckily for you, I'm in a friendly mood and will give you a chance to escape. I want to play a little game with you." "A game? What are you talking about? Why is this happening?" I asked. Mr. Harth kicked me in the stomach. "If I were you, I'd listen to the rules before I change my mind. The only rule is you have 10 minutes to get out of here. If you get outside the building without dying, you win," he said. "Good luck," Grant said with a chuckle. They both left the room and entered Dr. Grant's office and shut the door. "Fuck, I'm gonna die here," I thought. I stood up, slowly scanning my surroundings. I began to walk through the hall to see if there is some window I could get through or something. I couldn't find anything, and there was only one entrance, and that's locked from the outside. I suppose I'm gonna have to try to fight back to survive. Grant's door slams open, and the two of them emerge once more, both wielding a blunt object. "Are you ready to die, Doc?" "I've been waiting for this moment," said Harth. I was frozen. All I could do was watch them come closer. I had to think fast. "Wait, why is Dr. Grant here helping you?" The two of them stopped and looked at me, perplexed. "Mr. Harth, I didn't know that you needed a partner to take me out. I thought you could do that yourself," I said aggressively. Harth looked down at Grant. "Don't listen to him. He's just buying time for his pathetic little life. Plus, you told me that I'd be able to get a piece off of him for my research. In return, I'd let you walk free. Don't you remember?" Dr. Grant said to Harth. Harth was examining Dr. Grant very closely. "That is true, but I could kill you both, and I would be able to get the same result," Harth said. Dr. Grant was no longer smiling. He swung his weapon at Hearth, making contact with his chest. Hearth didn't budge. Grant swung again and again, trying to deter Hearth. Hearth raised his club high above Grant and brought it crashing down onto his head. Grant fell over like a ton of bricks. Hearth bent down and put his hands around his neck and began to choke the doctor. I could see the blood spurting out of Grant's head from the club and from the pressure at which he was being strangled. He turned blue. Hearth began to slam Grant's head into the ground as he choked him. He finally stopped once he stopped struggling. Hearth gets back up and turns over to me. "Thanks for that. I needed a little warm-up before I got to you." While he was tending to Grant, I found a weapon. It was a broken-off piece of pipe from one of the rooms. I had it hid behind my back to be sure that he wasn't aware I could defend myself. "Don't do this, Hearth. I was lining you up a transfer to the nearby prison. You can have your dream that you told me about," I yelled. "I decided that I wanted to rain terror in the streets again for a little while," he said as he approached me. I was walking backward and didn't notice the body of an orderly lying behind me, and I tripped over him and fell. He wasn't there before, and he looks like he was killed recently. I screamed in horror as Hearth laughed at me. I dropped my pipe as I realized that this was it. I am going to die, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. Hearth stood over me like I was a child and knelt, looking me in the eyes. He grabbed me by my neck and began to choke me. "I've been waiting for this moment since the day we met." His grip was so tight I thought my eardrums were going to pop. I was clawing at his face, trying to find a way for him to release me, but he just squeezed tighter. I was beginning to lose consciousness when I hear a scream. "He's mine." It was Bunt. She stabbed Hearth in the neck with something, and he released me. I was trying to catch my breath as she jumped on top of me, clawing and ripping at my face. Hearth grabbed her by the hair and threw her off of me, and ran at her. She threw a rock at him and him in the face, which slowed him down a bit before reaching her. As they were fighting, I looked at my phone and saw that I had a bar of service, so I called 911. The phone was kicked from my hand by Hearth, and my phone went sliding across the floor. He picked me up by my shirt and punched me in the face a few times, then dropping me to the ground again. I lay there battered, wishing for death at this point. No one was coming to help. Hearth had a big rock and was planning to drop it down onto my head and killing me with it when Bunt had attacked him again, biting him and hitting him with another rock she had. The blood from the previous stab wound was still running from his neck. As they struggled once more, I stumbled to my feet and ran for the door. I crashed into it a few times before breaking the lock to get out of the door. There was a police car on the outside waiting for me. "Good luck, you're going to need it," I say as I fall to the ground, bloodied from their beatings. I awoke in a hospital. Apparently, more police cars showed up at the scene, and there was a fight with Hearth. They shot him, and he ended up dying from his injuries. The police questioned me, and I told them everything I could remember. "I know that you had to kill Hearth, but what about Bunt, the woman?" I asked the officer. His reply will haunt me forever, and when I say lock your doors, please do. "What woman?" Posted on January 28, 2017, 9:02 p.m.